Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Film, Super Bowl edition. Buck Rising, happy to be back here with you. Greg, I'm sure you've spent our time away breaking down the Pro Bowl film with great importance, I imagine.
Well, after I did the East-West Shrine game.
a lot of all-star game, a lot of tape to break.
A lot of all-star game. Yeah, I'm not a big all-star game guy, for whatever reason. Although I have started watching college tape, but not all-star games, Buck.
Well, we'll have plenty of time to talk about college tape after the season is concluded. But in the meantime, we got a football game to talk about. Super Bowl 56, Rams and Bengals in Los Angeles. And Greg, these two teams, at least offensively, very, very much mirror one another.
To some degree, in one sense, yes, in that they both feature 11 personnel, one back, one tight end, three wide receivers. The Rams had the highest percentage in the league. The Bengals, I believe, were in the top three, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
But yes, they both feature that. Although it will be interesting in this game to me what the Bengals' approach is, because against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, Joe Mixon had 21 carries in that game. 16, Buck, came on first down.
Yeah.
11 of those 16 came with two tight ends on the field. And that was keeping in mind Uzama got hurt relatively early in the game. So they, even with CJ Uzama out of the game, they put in their third tight end and stayed with 12 personnel with two tight ends on the field. So, I think that's one of those open questions about the Super Bowl. We know that the Bengals need to run the ball because they can't be a throw ball offense with their offensive line.
Yeah.
Because every throw can't be a quick game 5-yard throw. You can't live like that. So how will they choose to run the ball, to me, is one of the open questions. Will it be out of 12 personnel or will it be out of 11 personnel? Obviously, that changes the Rams' personnel and approach.
Yeah, no, it's like you're reading my notes, Greg, because I wanted to ask you about how you've seen the Bengals offense kind of vary from from the start of the season, really the bulk of the regular season, where they did focus so much on the run. They seemed to get away from it a little bit as the season progressed. And then, as you mentioned, they got back to that run first approach in the championship game. It does seem, though, Greg, that because of their offensive line deficiencies, they're not particularly efficient in the running attack as well. But of course, you can't hang your quarterback out to dry the way that he has been against, like, the Titans, for example.
No, and that's a big question because, look, let's understand one thing is that the Bengals and their coaching staff understand that it's a weakness and that it's a matchup disadvantage for them. They know that going into the game. So the next question has to be asked. They're the ones who have to answer it.
Right.
How do you compensate for that? And how do you camouflage that particular weakness in this game? Because the last thing you want to have happen, Buck, and every coach knows this about certain areas of their team, because no team has a strength in every position and in every unit. There's no team like that. So the last thing you want to do if you're the Bengals is walk out of SoFi Stadium and say, God, we lost that game because of our offensive line.
Yeah.
That's the last thing they want to say. So the question becomes, how do they deal with that going in? And there's multiple ways to deal with it. Obviously, you'd love to be able to line up and run the ball with meaningful production, which then increases the volume with which you can run the ball. Yeah. Number two, it's the kind of runs. You'd like to be in a situation where the run game forces the defensive line to move laterally to defend the run, because then that can set up the play action pass game off those same run looks. Because what does that do? It means that when you show that same run look, and it's predominantly outside zone, is the defensive line takes a step and a half laterally, which means they're not going vertically attacking the quarterback. So it theoretically gives Burrow more time to throw. People may remember in the AFC Championship game, the first play of the third quarter was a 44-yard pass to T. Higgins. And I'm sensing you remember it because I could see it by the look on your face. And they came out on the first play, obviously 1st and 10, two tight ends. They went 7-man pass protection. It was essentially a 2-man route, and they hit Higgins for a 44-yard gain. against cover 4, which is a coverage that the Rams play. So the way to deal with it too, with maximum protection. Obviously, quick game throws deal with it as well. So there's multiple ways in which you can compensate for a weakness. Look, no team goes into a game and says, hey, let's be in as many 3rd and longs as possible. But there will be 3rd and longs. Those are the plays that potentially could be game changers on either side.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the idea that the Bengals, that just the hypothetical of the Bengals walking out of that game and being like, man, we knew that we couldn't let the offensive line beat us, and then the offensive line in that scenario having beat them, given the fact that they've done so well to make up for that or find ways to get around that throughout the course.
But they haven't. I mean, obviously they beat the Titans, but they beat the Titans, and that's all that counts at the end of the day. We know that, but that can't happen again. That would not happen. If Burrow gets sacked 7, 8, 9 times against the Rams, they're not going to beat the Rams.
Yeah, it's a 1 in a million opportunity to sack Joe Burrow 9 times and lose a football game. Not that I need to twist the knife any further here locally. Greg, we've talked a lot about Joe Burrow and the success that he's had against certain kinds of looks, particularly single high safety. He seems to have performed well throughout the course of the year, seems to operate well against man coverage in particular. What do the Rams want to do as a defense?
Well, this raises one of the most fascinating speculative elements of the game. Everybody's assuming that Jaylen Ramsey will match up to Jamar Chase, and he may well do that. You know, we don't know that, but the people who act as if it's a given have not watched the Rams play this year. The Rams play one of the lowest percentages of man coverage in the NFL. Ramsey has rarely, and I emphasize the word rarely been used as a matchup corner. Now, 2 weeks to prepare, things can change. Teams tweak, teams make adjustments. It's not like a regular week where you can't make major adjustments. You have far more practice time. Teams bring in all their scouts, all their personnel people. Much more film work is done. Much more analytical work is done. There's a lot more work done. Is it possible that they come into this game and say, Jaylen, you got Jamar? You know, the old cat coverage, you got that cat? That could happen.
Yeah.
But that would be nothing like they've done during the course of the season when Ramsey has not been a matchup corner. So that's all I can go by. Sure. You know, it could change. No question. But if it changes and they do decide to play man, then it's what kind of man do they play? Because keep this in mind. If they just decide to play normal cover 1, which is man coverage with a single deep safety, then that means that 5'9", 185 Darius Williams is matched up on 6'3", 220-pound T. Higgins. So it's easy to say Ramsey Chase, but then you got to live with the other side too.
Right, and because that collection of skill position players is so talented
as you
across
know,
the board.
As Denzel Washington said in the first Equalizer movie, if you pray for rain, you got to deal with the mud.
I did not think that I would get you on here quoting Denzel Washington.
I mean, you got to deal with that then. Yeah. Unless they want to make Ramsey purely a 0-man coverage player where there's no safety help, which also means that if the back is offset to that side, you're matching him man to man with no help. And then on the other side, you could play 5-over-3 and rush 4. And then you take care of the potential Darius Williams matchup disadvantage against Higgins. Yeah. But, these are all speculative points. They're great to talk about, and these are the things we think about. But the assumption, or let's put it this way, the gospel belief that Ramsey will play Chase, that's not the way the Rams play defense all season.
No. And, listen, if you're going to find a time to switch it up and throw curveballs at your opponent, the last game, the Super Bowl, would be a time to do that. But at this point, we're
and the Bengals will be prepared for that. That won't be news to them if that happens.
Yeah.
They certainly will be prepared for it.
Kind of in that same vein, Greg, I don't know if this is a fair question to ask you, but is there a time where you've seen a team or teams in the Super Bowl kind of divert drastically from what they have done throughout the course of the regular season? I know that's a lot of time spent.
Yeah, I'm sure they have. I can't remember specifically. Yeah. Look, does it make sense to do that on a certain intuitive level, Buck? It makes sense.
Sure.
Jaylen Ramsey is arguably one of the better man coverage corners in the league, even though he doesn't play it very often. He's certainly one of the better ones. and you have Jamar Chase, who
Yeah.
does most of his work, not all, most outside the numbers.
Yeah, this is gonna be a lot of fun. Not just because we've got different teams in the Super Bowl for the first time in what feels like forever, but this matchup, I'm really excited to watch how it plays out. Greg, the Bengals pass defense, it hasn't been overwhelmingly great throughout the
No,
course of the season, but I mean, in part because Mahomes seemed to not be in sync in the second half of the championship game. I did think, though, that they found ways to kind of tighten their grip on what Kansas City was trying to do. What did you see from the Bengals passing defense in the second half, or do you think that the issues were more on the part of the Chiefs?
I think it was a combination of both, but I will say this, the Bengals made a clear adjustment, which quite honestly surprised me that the Chiefs didn't deal with it better, but they didn't.
Yeah.
So in the first half of the game, the Bengals played almost all zone coverage with 2 deep safeties. They came out in the third quarter and played more man coverage, at times rushing 3 and dropping 8, but they played man. And what they did, and this was the important part, is they dropped Von Bell into the middle as a robber. So he'd be about 12 yards from the line of scrimmage, sitting right in the middle as a robber.
Yeah.
And that takes away one of the things the Chiefs really like to do, which is run Tyreek Hill on deep over routes from either the trips or twin side of the formation. And like I said, I was surprised the Chiefs didn't deal with it better, because I can guarantee you this for sure, Buck. It's not the first time Andy Reid or Patrick Mahomes saw a rush 3 drop 8, and it's not the first time Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes saw a robber in the middle of the field. So I think Mahomes crossed that line in the second half where his movement became unnecessary and random, where it had been for the most part over the last 2 months or so, kind of controlled and calculated. But I will say this, even in the first half on the touchdown he threw to Travis Kelce where he ran around, that was unnecessary movement. He had Tyreek Hill wide open on part of the mesh concept within the structure of the play with absolutely no pressure on him, and he ran around. And that time he happened to make a play. So people say, great play, Mahomes is Mahomes. When the second half, when he ran around and didn't make a play, they say he played poorly. So, with quarterbacks who run around randomly at times, you get both sides.
Yeah. And if you've been listening to the install all season long, this is the kind of stuff that Greg has been telling you. So when you see it materialize in games, you understand exactly what you've been looking at. Greg, with Matt Stafford in particular, obviously they have found ways. He's hugely talented. They've got yet another great collection of skill position players, or specifically the wide receivers in this offense. His interceptions, I know each interception has its own story, but he threw the pick that I thought was going to end their season. It just, the Jaquiski chart dropped it off his chest. What do you make of the variance of Stafford when it comes to those decisions, that isolation and elimination, as we've talked about before?
I don't think the variance is as big as people think it is,
Sure.
Buck. I mean, I think there are a couple of dramatic plays, both good and bad, that make it seem like there's a wide variance and, oh my God. And Stafford is aggressive. And I think that's one reason McVay wanted him and why he likes him and why he's not going to tone it down.
Yeah.
And why I personally think they're going to come out really aggressive in the Super Bowl. That's just a personal opinion. I think they're going to come out and see if they can build, a 14-0 lead, something along those lines, and maybe make Zac Taylor lose a little bit of patience, and then see if they can get that Ram D line cranked up against, the Bengals passing game. But anyway, that's just a personal point of view. Whether that happens or not, I guess we'll find that out on Sunday. But I think that Stafford is by nature aggressive. He will turn it loose. He'll make a couple of bad throws every game, but they throw it a lot.
Yeah.
But he also makes a lot of great throws.
Yeah. Some spectacular throws.
And it's so interesting, and not just you, but it's interesting that people, instead of saying, boy, Stafford made some great throws, the first thing you thought of, as a lot of people do, is, boy, he almost threw an interception. Now, I wonder if that's a general perception of Stafford because of where he played prior to the Rams, the fact that he lost 3 playoff games and was on a bad team. Whereas if that was, no one is saying, oh, Joe Burrow made a bad throw.
Yeah. Well, I think, that's the sports talk radio in me, Greg. It's
Right.
easier for me to dissect the things that
Right,
went
right,
wrong.
right. And by the way, no coach wants bad throws. I'm not suggesting that
Sure.
it's okay that he made that throw, but I think you're going to get that with Stafford at times, but you're also going to get some pretty damn good throws.
Without question. And I think the reason that primarily I bring that up is because to watch these games, the three that the Bengals have played, the Raiders, the Titans, and the Chiefs, again, no interception is created equal for the most part, but each of the final possession of the Bengals opponents has ended on an interception with Carr, with Tannehill, and with Mahomes in overtime. So my thought immediately goes, okay, more how can a team lose the game than how can the team go about winning it? And that tart almost interception, that sticks in my head, I think, more than anything.
The other thing that's interesting is we heard an awful lot about the overtime rules after Buffalo and Kansas City, correct?
Yes.
Did you hear anything about the overtime rules this week when Kansas City got the ball first and Mahomes threw an interception?
No, this is prisoner of the that kind of stuff is the prisoner of moment stuff that drives me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, they played a robber coverage on that interception, and they did a great job of passing it off, because what happened is I forget who the slot corner, it was Hilton, I'm sure.
Hilton,
so Hilton was lined up over, it was Hill, I believe he threw the ball to. It was obviously 2 weeks ago or close to it. And he passed him off to Bell and replaced him as the robber. And then Bell was able to get underneath Hill's route and make the throw a little more difficult for Mahomes. And Bates did an unbelievably good job of playing with range and getting over the top of it. But, obviously that was the turning point in the game.
Yeah, this Bengals defense has been a lot of fun to watch, the way that they kind of reconstructed it through free agency and seeing the dividends of that pay out throughout the course of this postseason. So, Greg, we've talked about, I think, a bunch of different angles of this game. I think, I'd never ask you to make a game pick, Greg, but who does the matchup favor in this?
Just a couple let's just throw out some random points here, Buck. I think a really important player here is Eric Weddle. Eric Weddle's played every snap but two in the 2 games since he's been back. I know Taylor Rapp has been cleared from concussion protocol,
correct,
but I can't imagine they're taking Eric Weddle out, because Eric Weddle is so savvy as an add-in run defender from the safety position. He has such a great feel for formations, where to add in, and we know that the Bengals are going to try to run the ball, and Mixon is a really good cutback runner. And I think that's where Weddle, his importance comes into play. 2 other players on the Rams, they absolutely need to be mentioned. Everybody will talk about Donald, Miller, and Floyd, but Greg Gaines and A'Shawn Robinson have played exceptionally well, particularly in the run game. And Gaines does not come off the field. No one really thought of him as a pass rusher coming out of UW, but he does not come off the field.
Yeah.
And he's played really, really well for the Rams over the last 6 weeks or so, maybe even the whole season. So those 2 players are clearly worth mentioning.
With Gaines in particular, because I feel like people do this a lot to Leonard Floyd, Greg, because he plays next to Aaron Donald and his production is obviously better when you're having that kind of a guy attract attention. Like, how unfair of an assessment is that to those 2 players in particular, given the quality of teammates that they have along the defensive line? Or is this just a player who's taking advantage of his matchups and playing really, really good football for them right now?
I mean, I think that the teams that they play against know all about them, and that's what matters.
Sure.
Quite honestly, this is, all the other stuff is just talk. When the Bengals are preparing to play, they're going to watch the tape and they're going to see that A'Shawn Robinson beats individual blocks. They're going to see that Greg Gaines beats individual blocks. They don't care what you and I say, or anybody else. They're watching the tape, as I'm doing, by the way, and I know what these guys do watching the tape. That's all the Bengals care about.
Yeah, it's like we talk about all the time. There is no opinions in film, only the film.
Yeah, it's the film. The film tells you. Look, we all know that as far as chatter, that the stars drive the chatter, the marquee names drive the chatter. Coaches don't think like that.
Yeah, no, and that's why this podcast is important, because it's important to remind people of that when they're discussing these kind of games. And this is going to be the last one of the 2021-22 season. Greg, it's been a lot of fun to break these games down with you. I know we're going to figure out a schedule in the offseason to kind of continue this coverage. But in the meantime, buddy, I've really, really enjoyed our conversations during this season, and I'm looking forward to a great game on Sunday.
All right, Buck. Thanks. Appreciate it.